Yeah.
Oh, Smith.
All right. I'm excited because we already know we got a good win here
Mhm.
per Amy, but let's go over uh, our um our agenda for today. So we'll start with wins of the week. We've got some cool stuff coming from the product team and with Amanda and Leron, and then we'll jump over to our special guest, Brian, and we'll kick it right on into it. So with that, I will stop sharing, Jim, and let you lead it off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew. Again, great to have you back. Hey, everybody. So, wins of the week. So, Amy, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So Cody Brandow with Heartland Business Systems, who's usually on this call, he's a managed services engineer on the security side over there, sent us a little story this morning. I have it on my other screen, which is why I'm not looking at y'all while I'm talking about it. So he has a client that's a furniture manufacturer. The user typically works from Erie, Pennsylvania, and they saw attempted connections from both New Jersey and Texas. And before the threat actor was actually able to get in, the client doesn't use MFA. So phishing combined with session token theft was the root cause of the compromise. The threat actor created an email rule named ! That deleted all emails and marked them as read. Respond took the appropriate actions to lock out the user, expire sessions, and change the password. He added one of the most interesting things they saw in this case was there was never any activity outside of the US. A lot of times they see the failed login via conditional access policies prior to that activity, but that wasn't the case here.
Interesting.
So nice win for Respond. And I think that new rule, or I don't know what they're called, rules or parameters, where you can just like do the exclamation point and it, tackles everything. Ben can speak to that more and eloquently than I can.
No, I did a pretty good job.
Okay. Enrique has his hand up too.
So we had a win, another one.
Love it.
I hope you guys don't start charging by wins.
No.
Oh, there's an idea, Enrique.
That is an idea.
Okay, free till we have wins.
Okay.
So yeah, we had same customer that was compromised a year and change ago. Had another attack on the 24th, 0 hours, complete token theft. The funny thing is that earlier in the day, they configured MFA for the first time, and hours later, they get compromised. So that I haven't gone in full detail into it, but yeah, we were able to respond and block it. So yeah, another great job by Respond.
So, a couple things there, Enrique. So, this attack bypassed MFA in this
This attack
situation?
bypassed MFA. Yes. So
Yep.
there was actually, I think, 2 incidents. I just have the ticket for the complete incident where it breached, but I think it first started, the user got compromised. We blocked it without MFA. The IT guy for the company at that point resetted his password, forced him to turn on MFA. And then hours later, he gets compromised again with MFA.
Oh, wow. So
Sounds like
this
data
is
security awareness training.
yeah. So this is it sounds like a co-managed
Yes.
customer. Okay.
And he was an admin account?
No, he was just a regular account, a regular user. They're the ones that got compromised a year ago, and then finally they created, we alerted them because they didn't want such aggressiveness measures as stopping them. So they got compromised. Then we realized it when they called for financial records and stuff, a client to make money transfers. A year later, a couple of months ago, they finally got them. They created a different domain, very similar. And they finally got a customer of theirs to pay them instead of the actual company. So they've been going on this for a year and change, but now they're really happy that the aggressive posture of blocking them was taken. So yeah, they're going to be a constant battle with these guys.
How long have they been on SaaS Alerts?
We got them on June, July of last year.
Okay.
And we picked up the first one. We created the ticket. We notified them of all the different steps where they stole the passwords, where they created a mailbox redirect to a weird folder. So we notified them over days what was happening, but they weren't paying attention to the tickets.
Okay. So at this point, the internal IT guy, if I'm in his shoes, right, I'm going to ask for a login to SaaS Alerts so he can also manage respond in a way that, you know, it doesn't seem like he has any interest. Is that fair to say?
But it's work in progress, educating them, and these are like
Can't ask that question on camera, Jim.
I was going to say, you're too nice,
no.
Enrique. You're too nice.
Well, I think we all start somewhere. Remember,
Yeah.
I got my ass kicked ransomware, so
Yeah.
we all start somewhere, and he's work in progress, like all my customers. So yeah, and we had multiple attacks this week. We had another one that the Defender integration picked up, of logging in a password spray. So that was earlier this week, and then just yesterday, that same user, he's using passwordless MFA with Microsoft Authenticator. So he started getting alerts, which I'm a little wary on that one, on the passwordless MFA or passwordless login with your Microsoft Authenticator app, because now that they know his email, they just have to continue to put in his email. It's going to push him, and he has to put in the numbers. One of those they can catch you. Because what other mechanism is there if you're using passwordless login?
Right. Right. So interesting comment about the 2FA as well. I did a webinar yesterday with Robin Robbins. And one of the questions from one of the attendees was, well, I've got 2FA. Shouldn't that be enough? And at this point, we all know people should have 2FA on there. I said, look, it's like just because you get in a car and put your seatbelt on doesn't mean that you should disable the airbags. Right. So it's multi-layered, but we see it more and more and more that 2FA is getting bypassed. So awesome. Great stuff, Enrique. See, Andy's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a win of the week is what SaaS Alerts has done in the cloud space for MSPs. What this call has done for me over the last year, I am now aware of how to better deal with my customers' cloud. I am now have a security awareness thanks to what Andrew and you guys have done to make me aware of the tactics, techniques, and way that they come about this. I'm now able to use Fortify to help employ compliance onto my customers in the cloud. And I'm able to say, these are the benefits that you get. And SaaS Alerts has raised the general awareness of everyone on this call. And if they watch it on YouTube, about how to be more secure in the cloud. And I think that's a win right there.
Awesome, Andy. Thank you so much. Really appreciate those remarks. And the big takeaway from your comments there is that we should now be charging people to join the SASE call. I think that's the next evolution.
We're grandfathered in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah. Andrew, we got to pay you somehow. So we got to start collecting at the door.
Jim,
It's like a cover charge.
Can I be the bouncer?
Jim, it's just interesting what you said though about you know, how we started off like 2 years ago, Jim, you and I talking. Well, we were on stage and at Write a Boom, and
yeah,
right before we knew your report was coming out about
right.
30, I guessed 31% or whatever it was.
It was, you guessed it on the nose. I
Yeah.
remember, I'll never forget it. I was walking on the streets of Tampa and I said to you, Andrew, our report has just come out. Guess how many small businesses around the world are now employing 2FA via our MSPs? And you said 32%, which was exactly the number.
What was interesting, so just real quick. What was interesting that year was Executive Director Wales of CISA came to Write a Boom, and then he was talking about enterprises because that's what they focus on.
Yeah.
Microsoft Enterprise Cloud, and ironically the same number right in that area. But it's just interesting now that, Andy, you just talked about TTPs, how threat actors evolve, right? Yes, MFA, it's not to say don't use MFA, right? It's certainly better than nothing, but the amount of token hijacking and attack, adversary in the middle attacks that we're seeing, right, Chip, are just becoming commonplace. And now it's like, if it's taken this long to get people to, basic MFA, is it going to be, my rhetorical question is to get them to phishing resistant MFA, which is a whole.
So they're constantly falling behind at this point. I mean, they're being lapped.
Yeah.
And in terms of evolution too, by the way, just to put a fine point on actually the story that Amy shared, Cody was right in terms of pointing this specific piece of information out. In the past, a lot of these attacks have demonstrated someone logging in from a outside approved location or someplace outside the country. They're now attacking from inside the country to trip up the outside approved location stuff.
Well, we see that, right, in these phishing kits, right, Jim, and Corey can probably, Corey chimed in with this other piece, which is interesting, but we know that, these VPN, I'm drawing a blank on the terminology the threat actors use, but, be spinning up, whether it's through Cloudflare or these other mechanisms, right, Chip, we've seen this time and time again now of, the threat actors aren't stupid. They know they're going to be looking at geolocation, right? So
yeah, geolocation for sale, and what's being used is the old botnets. If some of you may remember the term botnet from the mid to early 2000s, and those old botnets, many of them never went away. At least the people who were managing them never went away. Obviously, the endpoints and the devices that were compromised and used as part of those botnets have changed, but the people managing them were still around, just with new devices. And they've turned those botnets, which were formerly there and still are there to perform DDoS attacks and other such things, into geolocation for rent, basically. Right. You want an IP address down to a particular neighborhood of a particular city, here it is. You can buy it if you want to go on a spear phishing campaign against Jim Lippy, and you need it to look like it's coming from Saratoga, New York. Precisely.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Corey, just a quick question. The snail mail are like, I've seen things around QR codes. Is that the way you're seeing those threats? There's also been the stuff where you have packages delivered that are somebody physically interrogating an organization. What do you mean by the increase in snail mail you're seeing, Corey?
Well, it's kind of an extent. It's not what that I'm directly seeing as of yet, right? So I haven't directly seen it, but it's a growing threat with the fact of kind of extending. I think it was the last one of these calls we had where we were talking about how now those, hey, I saw you something doing naughty, how they're smart enough to know where your house is, take a Google Maps screenshot, right? How they've changed their tactics to be a little more effective. Well, this kind of goes into just cybersecurity in general, right? Where we're all becoming more and more familiar with, I need to be protected on my desktop, right? But we're still not as protected on our phones because we're still complacent with it, and we'll just click on anything. Or, hey, I thought it was my daughter logging into my Outlook, so I'd said yes to that push notification. Happens all the time. We see that all the time.
Right.
So what the adversaries, obviously, as you were talking about TTP, is consistently pivoting. Think about the amount of risk that's out there around snail mail, because we've kind of written off snail mail, right? No one really uses it anymore, right? We're all familiar with those phishing attacks around, hey, I'm the IRS, you owe me this money. And so, well, what do we tell them? They're not going to call you. They're not going to send you an email. What are they going to do? They're going to send you a letter in the mail.
Right.
And all they got to do is put a nice little letterhead on it. And now that we're in 2024, put a good old QR code on there, right? To help pull up that file and pull up it, what's going to save an end user from that?
Yeah.
And then again, as you said, the combination of direct targeted attacks. So it's super easy to find out now where someone lives. Most of it's public information. So if this is a targeted attack, right, they can send you those packages. They can send you that cell phone, right? They can send you that USB device. Yeah, that's still a thing, USB device attacks, right?
Oh, huge.
And so this is something that, when you're going through your cybersecurity training, when you're talking to people, as silly as it seems, bringing it up. Give the food for thought because it's growing, right?
Yeah.
It's not as prevalent as the digital phishing attacks, but it's growing. It's going to be even more effective as time goes on.
It's the what's old is new, Corey. We've seen it time and time again, things that worked then didn't, or some type of, vulnerability that people forgot about that now is extorted all over again. So Enrique, can you hold 1 second? Jim, I just because of what Corey said, can I jump ahead a second and show something?
Yeah.
Just this was going to be my conversation after Brian, but Corey, they just ratcheted this up a whole notch. When we talked about the sextortion, probably like 3-4 weeks ago, it was, they were using, the Google Geo, taking it more from a street view, but now they've taken it to a whole different level of this. And what they're doing is, it's a pressure attack, right? As most attacks are. You're right. It's some type of, either urgency, right? Urgency, like, hey, Michael needs this right now, Corey, right? He's he's abroad. He needs it right now. Can you get this? So now what they're doing is they're taking it from street view to your window and your home, sending a PDF and basically saying, hey, look, this is what we're going to do with, like, we have all your, what you were doing, the pic, where you were on the internet, the sites you were on, what you were doing.
Go back
Jim,
to that
something you
picture.
hear often than, naughty boy, but,
Go back to that picture. But this is even more social engineering. If you look at that picture that you had up there,
yeah,
it makes more sense. Instead of sending you a snip of a clear shot from Google View or Google Maps, because then obviously, smarter people will be like, okay, there hasn't been anybody sitting outside my house. I live on a busy road. What are you talking about, right? So why not add a little bit of blur to it? Like, I'm driving by your house and I'm taking this picture, which makes it a little more realistic by adding the slight blur to it.
Yep. Yeah. So they're taking, anyway, we talk about TTPs. You can see like how they're continuing to, again, so what? They send out 10,000 of these, emails. What percent do they need to be profitable? Right? Not a lot. Gary, by the way, did you get the one I sent you? Gary Harlan?
That?
I said, did you get the one I sent you?
Not this time.
Enrique, thanks for your patience. Yeah.
So quick question. Last time we ran out of time and I wanted to ask this do you minimize the attack surface by using a third-party MFA? So, because right now, like your Evil Jinx and all this that we showcase here and talked about in different events, it's very focused. It's the Microsoft login. And then I think not because they're stealing like a cookie, but I don't know if like a Duo MFA or Evil, whatever, any other MFA out there uses the same mechanism that they can steal it the same way or hijack it.
Yeah, Corey, what he's asking is, does the MFA matter whether you're using Duo, whether you're using, the session cookie is the session cookie, fair? If they hijack, yeah, Chip's shaking his head. So I don't think that really matters to that degree. It's not like if I use Kleenex versus a different brand, Enrique, does the threat actor,
that session's authorized that cookie.
session.
So it doesn't matter what third party, first party you use, it's already authorized.
Yeah.
Yeah, Enrique, the next thing that we're all going to be preaching sometime maybe next year when Microsoft brings secure session tokens out of preview and into general acceptance is, we're going to be advising our MSP partners, and hopefully you're going to be advising your customers. Look, I know it's inconvenient, but you need to join all your devices to Entra or use Intune to manage them. You need to use secure token access, which, by the way, still isn't flawless. Ben has already experimented with it and found a way around it because Microsoft is using the agent string to associate the token, not device hardware ID identifier yet, but I think it will get there eventually. And that's going to be the only surefire way. And once again, we'll be having a debate with customers around security versus convenience. You know, what we've had that debate, just getting people to realize that MFA is not as big a deal as they think it is. You know, we've been preaching FIDO keys, YubiKey for at least the past year, I think, as an improvement over other forms of MFA, one that actually makes it easier for your customers to connect to all their different applications than more difficult. Once it's set up, and the setup period is no more difficult than setting up, you know, regular push-based MFA. Once it's set up, it's actually far easier.
It is.
This will continue to evolve, and there's going to be a whole nother set of tools to use, and we'll be out there pushing it, and our customers will be pushing back, maybe.
So none of these passwordless MFAs that vendors have told me they're not hijackable because there's no password, but well, they don't have to hijack just every session into Microsoft via web, leave a token cookie.
Yes, it all
So it doesn't matter if you flew in there, walked in there, or crawled in there, that cookie's there, you're screwed.
Exactly.
Get access
By the
to
way,
it.
it's not just Microsoft. You know, I'm the first guy to bash Microsoft. We always talk about them because they represent almost all of everyone's business. But it's Google, it's Slack, it's any web-based, browser-based product that you're logging into that has a web architecture backend. Because, by the way, there's a session token created when you log in using an email client, your Outlook email client that you've downloaded on your application. It's local. That has a permanent token as well. So, and there's evidence that those tokens can be hijacked if the device is compromised. You can't get them with an attack, a man-in-the-middle attack or an attacker in the middle compromise. But if you compromise the device, you can get at those tokens. So that authorization tokens are a byproduct of web architecture in the modern era of software as a service applications. They're part of the core engineering stack of every one of them.
And how about these?
Much better approach. That's what we use everywhere in our company, but it still creates a session token. So personally, I'm passwordless for everything because I use one of those. I never enter a password. I go straight through to my YubiKey, you know, in my case, I use a fingerprint identity. A lot of our folks use RFID. I'm even too paranoid for RFID. That's a whole different conversation. But it still creates a session token when you're connecting with your credentials to the back end of that app.
And that could be hijacked as well.
The tokens is hijackable no matter what. If there's an attacker in the middle that's intercepting that stream, you can get to it. The best defense that I've heard other folks on this call talk about so far, I think Corey brought this up 2 or 3 weeks ago at least, is, you know, there's a couple products out there now like Have I Been Cloned, others that will actually embed a cookie into the sign-on screen, but you've got to have a customer that's willing to have you customize their Microsoft sign-on experience. So, you know, an attacker isn't going to know that the background should be a different color.
I thought Evil Jinx skewed you up with that because they pull up we customize all our customers' login screens, but I thought they would still get the original login screen.
They'll get the original Microsoft login screen.
Oh, not the customized.
No.
They'll give the customized too.
Yeah,
Chip.
I heard they were getting the customized as well with
Evil Jinx will pull it. But I think Chip, what you were talking about was that one that modifies the CSS a little bit.
Yes.
And checks the as like a PHP or Perl server and verifies that the referrer is actually Microsoft and not another site.
Corey, you're saying disabling the push. Why? And can you?
So the hardest part, and you know, kind of what he was talking about, well, do we use Microsoft? Do we not use Microsoft? What's the risk? Your biggest challenge is first off adoption, right? That's your number one challenge as an MSP for your customers to adopt MFA in general. We all know that, right? Second, I think one of the biggest risks are the push notifications. They're simple, they're easy, right? Easy, you can just do on your watch, click it, boom, MFA has been authenticated. We've seen way too many live compromises happening from those push notifications because it's too easy. right?
Well, that's why they came out with the 2-digit.
So I've seen, yeah, but I've seen, and that's even easy too.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, right? And I made the comment earlier, but it's true. Like I've heard it more than once. So I thought it was my kid logging into my email, and so as they're working or typing this email, boom, they hit yes, allow it. Good. I need to finish this email. I got to focus in on this because we're all too busy, right, to deal with this. And so we've seen way too many compromises happening just because someone accepted that push notification. And if you just think about the normal end user, yes, I'm in Outlook right now. Yes, I'm typing in Outlook. Freaking Microsoft is asking me to authenticate again. Yes, I'm using Outlook right now. Let me type my email or do what I need to do in this spreadsheet, right? And it's just, they fall for it.
Yeah.
They let the bad guys in the door.
I think a few solutions, Corey, I see if you've seen like a solution like AppGate, which is, we're going to be talking to Brian coming up here, which is, I think, one of the only solutions that has passed all of the FedRAMP and DoD certifications. So that you have a tool that's like single packet authorization, ZTNA solution. So you start to try to take something over, it immediately checks everything from MAC, all these different facets, MAC address, AV. It has all these different zero trust items it goes through in nanoseconds. And that's the only, but again, talking about are your customers going to spend the money for it, and is everybody going to do it? That's that's the thing. You're typically only seeing this in highly regulated type industries where it's a requirement, and or large financial institutions and things of that nature.
We need a cookie encryptor or a token encryptor, some type of layer.
I'm asking the question, can we eliminate authorization tokens with just like a YubiKey or something? That would be, to me, a way to tie that into a browser, and then it wouldn't use a token any longer. You'd have to have that device with you.
The authorization token still gets created, Andy, even after that authentication.
No, I'm with you, but finding a way to eliminate it altogether.
Well, you're gonna have to ask Microsoft, Google, and every other SaaS provider to re-engineer their products and not use them.
So, Jim, hey, in interest of time, if we jump on over to Amanda and Leron, and then we'll get to Brian. Is that cool with you?
Yep, absolutely.
And Leron, I think you're working on that encryptor, aren't you?
I'm working on the what, Andrew?
The encryptor Andy just recommended?
Yeah, it's the next thing on the backlog.
Okay, perfect. All right. Amanda.
Andrew, we're going to change the order around. I asked Amanda if I could go first because I think what Amanda has is potentially more interesting than what I have. So we just pushed to production our Ignite integration. I'm going to quickly show you guys what that looks like and share my screen. Well, Leron is bringing that up. How many folks actually have customers on Ignite?
We do. We're getting them off, but we have a couple that are still on it.
Okay. This was an application that was requested quite a bit over the last couple of years. So,
Jim, for those that aren't using it, can you give a quick high level, Leron, or whatever? We got 50 people here. Some are using it, most aren't on the call.
So my understanding of it is basically a Dropbox-like application designed for MSPs.
Okay.
To get their customers on it.
File storage and sharing.
Yep. So this will be very quick, guys. As you know, the process to getting access to our beta applications is to reach out to your account manager, and your account manager will have our support team enable this for you, and you will see it right here. And what I will now show you is once I have this connected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to today, and I'm going to execute a quick query here on Ignite. And since Mike was the guy who was testing this for us, I'm going to do Mike at SaaS Alerts.
Oh, I forget whether we have a testing domain that is saasalert.com without the S, so it's tricky and I always forget. So this is Mike's activity, saasalerts.com. So we see Ignite, and we have quite a few events. I believe we have 8 with more coming on the way here. So user deleted, password reset, MFA disabled, user disabled, user created, auth success, auth failure is on here as well. So again, new product, Ignite, something that you can now monitor in beta fashion. And if you are interested, please reach out to your account manager. Any questions for me on the Ignite integration?
Hopefully people that are using it for their customers will find it useful. And if you do have customers that are on it, charge them $50, $100 a month for the ability to monitor it. That's what I would do.
All right, Amanda, off to you.
Thanks. So I have updates from the Fortify side of the world. So there's a couple of things, and then I'm going to show you my screen. So as we keep rolling out more and more parameters, just an update that for the auto forwarding recommended actions, we now support the exclusion of users, groups, domains, and domains as a parameter. We have a new recommended action, which is actually block device code authentication flow. So this is for devices that, you know, you have limited ways of connecting to them. And so think about the smart TVs that people might be using in conference rooms. You know, so you might want to block the device code authentication so that people aren't having to authenticate directly on the device. So that's a new cap that's available in Fortify. We have another new recommended action, which is a token protection cap. And so this has been talked about a couple of times. This is the token protection that Microsoft has in the preview mode that we expect for them to load soon.
Amanda,
yeah,
are you sharing your screen? Because
not yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
Yep, it's okay. I will in just a second because this is
Okay.
I want to show the token protection one, and I want to show the next thing I'm talking about. So token protection cap is now available, as well as one more that I'll talk about. So I will share now. So you guys can see Fortify dashboard.
Yes.
Okay. So if you were to come to your actions, you can now see we have require token protection for sign-in sessions conditional access policy. This recommended action now has the customization as well as the information behind it. So this is specifically for the token protection, like I said, which is in preview right now, which will be released by Microsoft. So you can add this to your Fortify tenants with the configuration of the parameters. And you can see here the specific additional item for the parameter is the IPv4 or 6 range, besides our typical groups, users, directories, and you have location as well in this one. So then the last item that I want to show everybody is kind of a 2-part update. So we have something that we are now calling a dynamic cap. And so a dynamic cap is going to be a recommended action that is able to update itself. And so the first dynamic cap that we're releasing is one that is going to be working around compromised IP addresses. So if you search for compromise in the list, you will see that we have this new one that has the brackets dynamic cap in front of it. For now, this is how we are indicating it. We will be having an icon that'll indicate this with a tooltip, so you're able to review the dynamic ones. So anything that's dynamic will have this bracket for right now. So this is the new cap that we have. So block known compromised IP addresses. And so again, if you hit the light bulb, you'll get a blurb about what this is. So this is conditional access policy that'll block known compromised IP addresses. And like I said, dynamic means it's going to be updating itself. And so for this one specifically, it'll be updating every 24 hours. we are getting this IP address list based off of the attacks that Ben and his team are seeing. And so this IP address list will be maintained and updated as we see current active issues that are happening, attacks that are happening. So this will be updated every 24 hours. If you have an IP address that is flagged as one of the ones that we are blocking, but you need for business use, you can hit the add parameters, and under the parameters section, you'll see enter new IPv4, IPv6 range. And so you can see here specifically, if you want to exclude IP addresses that are wrongfully identified as compromised, that are required for business continuity, you're able to enter those here. So these items that I just reviewed will be released mid next week. They've all been through our testing cycle and we're waiting to release them. They are not on production yet, but will be as of next week.
Awesome. Questions for Amanda or Leron?
Sounds like a bunch of folks like it based on the comments.
Andy's
And-
got his hand
Yeah,
up.
All
I have
kinds
a
of hands
question
up.
for Ben and the MSA group. As I'm really glad, one, that we have MSA, so we don't have to learn all these new features that you're adding in SaaS Alerts. But what my real question is how do we onboard these new capabilities and become aware and communicate those back to the MSA team?
How do we communicate them to you, or?
Vice versa, both ways, so you're going to say, hey, look, we have these capabilities, what we want to implement, and hey, this might be a known bad IP, and here's how we know that these are good sites, for example.
Most of the metrics that we pull are from monitors that we've set up. It's not like ones that we don't punch them in manually or anything. They're ones that have been identified as doing malicious activity.
All right, so let me take it one step further. When we onboard a new account into MSA, how do we ratchet up these different capabilities over time?
That'll be something we'll be doing for you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to that, this is the first dynamic cap that we're putting together. You can imagine that Ben is very excited about this. We're all very excited about this. And really collectively working as a community, right? Antonio and I had this back and forth going in the channel a bit here, where he kind of identified a really new, interesting threat pattern that we want to get into and to understand. And if we identify a new threat vector and we've identified that we can block those IPs, from our standpoint, we have the infrastructure in place, go through our data, identify these bad IPs, and just create a whole set of these dynamic conditional access policies. So if you guys do see threats that you believe are ongoing at the global scale, we can compare that against our overall data, confirm that, and then get those baked as dynamic conditional access policies that you can deploy out to all of your customers at scale. And it really will improve the community as a whole.
It's like your very own ISO, Leron.
Pretend I don't know what that means, Andrew.
Information sharing,
Yeah.
You know what it is, right?
And we're going to be looking at making some product enhancements as well to flag these bad IPs, right? But you guys know our mantra of progress over perfection. So we wanted to get this out. We believe this is going to serve and provide value as soon as it's released.
Very cool.
And just coming back to Andy's point, again, those that are on managed SaaS alerts. Ben and his team will be implementing this on your behalf. That's how that works. So Enrique's got his hand up.
I'm just going to go back to the future here a little bit. So I can't wait to see it with Defender, Intune policies, Unify, and a whole bunch of other stuff doing this dynamic tagging. And
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So there's a lot of exciting things ahead for sure.
All right, Jim, you made an intro to Brian with me. This is actually an older picture of you, Jim. I just wanted to show everybody.
Yeah. I'm like Benjamin Button. I just keep going. Backward.
So, Brian, welcome. We'll do a fireside chat today here. I'm not sure. Jim, do you want to do the intro? It sounds like you know.
Yeah, that'll be great.
We'll take
So, first of all, welcome, Brian. For those that don't know Brian, he is a OG partner from a while back. He's been on SaaS Alerts for quite some time now. I met him at a seven-figure event at least 2 years ago. At this point, we had a great conversation over breakfast one day, and he reached out to me recently about how he's starting to pivot his business. And I thought that the information was so valuable that I asked him to actually share it here on the Sassy call. One interesting side note: when we were emailing back and forth, we were trying to set up a time to talk, and he sent me his Calendly link, Andrew, and I said, "Sorry, Brian, you're gonna have to send me Times analog because I don't click on links."
Ooh, very well played, Jim.
Yes. So with all that being said, Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as Wes Spencer would say, you're eating your own tacos.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And I know we're going to get into
turn off
it,
the
Andrew.
screen share?
Screen share? I can. Yeah, I had some slides here, but sure.
Yeah, I wanted to hear Brian. That was where I was going with this, but sorry.
Hey there. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Jim, for the introduction. And so my company is Exceed Cyber, and we help companies, organizations, whether they're defense contractors or MSPs that are trying to kind of wrap their head around CMMC, how to go about that. And again, Jim, I appreciate the introduction to Andrew. I just want to preface this by saying we have like 15 minutes, and this is like an hour's deep conversation potentially. So we're going to scratch the surface a little bit here. And I'm sure Andrew's going to ask questions, and I'm sure you guys will have questions. So do my best.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian. This is yeah, as you said, this is a very deep subject to say the least. While I kick things off, I'm going to ask rhetorically the group out there: do you work with, people that are affectionately called the DIB, the defense industrial base? Do you have clients, so that we know like who in the audience is working? And then, interestingly, Brian, as I asked you the first question to kind of unpack CMMC and how do we get here, as you put it. What we found in my conversations over the years with guys like Ryan Bonner, Jacob Horn, who you may know as well, often we find that MSPs find out that they have clients in the defense industrial base after the fact, which isn't a good thing. One in particular was I know of a story, and quick story, and I'll hand it to you to get into it, of a kitchen, this company, Brian, did all sorts of appliances, right? So as an MSP, why do I think, this company that does appliance distribution would ever be in the defense industrial base? Well, lo and behold, they reach out to the MSP and like, hey, we've got to do this, to, make sure that we're in compliance. And lo and behold, they were getting CUI, which I know you'll describe to everybody, about certain bases that they were installing their refrigeration equipment in, and the MSP had no clue. So real stories, right, Brian, that we find about the importance of doing things like business impact analysis and true assessments on your customers. So with that, let me let you take it away.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's actually really helpful to kind of go back a little, just really quick and dirty over the history. Is that cool?
Yeah.
I'm just going to do a real quick screen share, okay? So can you guys see this little arc of time?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right. So just kind of a little background. First of all, CMMC, as Andrew succinctly pointed out, and there's again, Jacob Horn and Ryan Bonner, guys are total rock stars in the MSP space. They're evangelists around this. And those are people that I learned from as well, right? Where there's always more to learn. And so I'm sure you guys feel the same way. So there's a lot to unpack here, but how did this come about, right? So it started with the 2004 9/11 Commission report. It was found that by this congressional investigation that 9/11 could have been mitigated or potentially avoided if there was more information sharing between government agencies, especially intelligence. And so that wrapped into the 2005 to 09 building out of NIST 800-53. May have never heard of that, but that's essentially the cadre and the massive chunk of compliance requirements, or think of it as practices and controls that the federal governments, the federal systems have to abide by. It's like 900 plus controls. It's huge. Around the same time, a subset of this was 800-171. You guys have heard about that. Currently on revision 3, but CMMC refers to revision 2. That was built around the same time, but not much was done with it. And in 2010, a presidential executive order established the meaning behind and a definition and implementation of managing and controlling this controlled unclassified information, or CUI, called CUI often, right? And so that's the next evolution. Well, now it gets really interesting. So in the middle of that highlighted section, 2016-17, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, or DFARS, which is against defense and how the Defense Department buys products and services from the supply chain. They said, okay, cool, we're going to be baking in these requirements for protecting CUI, right, across the entire all defense contractors. And they rolled that out across contracts. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think anyone did this?
Of course they did, Brian.
Of course, everybody did it, right? Because that's exactly why they had to release CMMC. So over the next like 5 years or so, next couple years later, the DoD, that what's called the DIBCAC, Defense Industrial Base Center for Assessment, Cybersecurity Assessment, they did some investigations and found out, oh shit, none of these guys implemented these controls, right? So what are they going to do? Well, no, now they got to get serious. They got to actually build in some teeth, right? So what they figured out they needed to do is create the CMMC process. From a naming perspective based on CMMI, but as far as the controls go, it stands for, by the way, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, okay? 110 controls, and if you're, we're talking about maturity level 1 and 2 in a second, but they had to roll this out. The DoD had to create this and roll this out over a long period of time to establish it and build it during the rulemaking phases, and went from 5 maturity levels down to 3, and it went through various iterations. But ultimately, it's being finalized through Title 32, end of this year, around December, and then Title 48 means inclusion in contracts starting early next year, okay? And then it's going to be fully rolled out over 3 years across all main what are those? The big primes, essentially, over 3 years. And then the DoD has this requirement. It's what's called a flow down requirement. Stop my share. So the flow down requirement means that anybody that does business directly with the DoD, they have to flow this down to all their subcontractors, and everybody has to comply. So that's how we got here. So you guys tired yet?
No, that's certainly new information for me. As we talked about the other day, like, I think this is fantastic information that I think a lot of people should know, especially if they have customers, in defense.
So the real takeaway is we're all subcontractors of the DoD if we do any work with any of their subcontractors. Because as MSPs, we got to live up to that, right?
Yeah, you're a special kind. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, it's called an ESP. We'll get into that a bit later.
Yeah, so Brian, you mentioned ML1 and ML2. You want to just unpack that a little bit for everybody, what that means, and
sure,
and maybe we can, based on time, to Andy's question, maybe you could tie that in. Hey, I've got a client that has to be ML2. What does that mean for me, right?
Sure. Yeah, so there's 3 different levels of CMMC maturity level 1 through 3. Maturity level 1 means you have to control and you have to rather safeguard. The term that they use is safeguarding federal contract information, FCI. All right, that's like literally the contract you have as a prime with the DoD or the subcontractors with their prime or upstream subcontractor, right? I know it gets a little squirrely, but I'm just interested, Tom, going fast. That's 17 controls, right? Security controls, and some of them are administrative, some are people related, some are physical security. Then maturity level 2, which is, by the way, an estimated roughly 1/4 to 1/5 of the entire DIB of about roughly 300,000 companies. About 80,000 are estimated to have to be compliant to maturity level 2. These are existing defense contractors or ones entering the space. They have to adhere to NIST 800-171, and most of you guys know those are 110 controls, right? It's a dramatically much greater lift, and those contractors must safeguard any CUI, controlled unclassified information, that's either stored, processed, or transmitted.
Awesome. And then, I'm an MSP, Brian, that has a customer that is a level 2. What does that mean for me?
Yeah, what it means for you is, first of all, you got to have a serious conversation with your customer and identify if, first of all, you want to find out what they actually are. Because we can make a lot of assumptions and be told something or think something is the case, but you got to check the literature, right? Check the contract. Look through there, do a control F for DFAR, is it just 7012? Look for that now. If you have customers in that space, look that up. If you find that is confirmed and that bears out that they do have to hit maturity level 2, then you have to have that conversation with the client and say, listen, we need to buckle down because this is going to be a bumpy ride, right? Conversely, what does it mean for the MSP? I think, Andrew, that was your question, right? What does it mean for us as MSPs? Sadly, what it means for MSPs is that you have to be at the same, to serve the customer, right? In the capacity you are today, with the access you have, you're what's called an ESP, an external service provider, right? So just a fancy term for MSP, right? You have to be certified, and there has to be a third-party certification for most of these companies. You have to be certified alongside them at the same level that they have to be at, because the access you have is significant, and you're effectively could be, a supply chain attack or threat vector.
Absolutely. And then, I think it's one of the reasons, Brian, why, companies like yours exist, because MSPs that, may find this out all of a sudden, the timeline to get ready, maybe you could talk about that, and the latest release of Article 252, et cetera. Our timeline window has now all of a sudden really the hourglass is flipped, and we have to ask ourselves, can I be ready? Can my client be ready?
Yeah.
In fairness to both of us, right? Probably first to our client if we're doing the right thing. And then what % of my revenue does this make up, et cetera.
You have to have some honest and serious conversations, not just with your team, but also with your customers, and identify if you have one client who's a DoD customer and they may spit off 5K top line, right? If you're lucky, you're making $1,000 a month off of them. Is it worth it to maintain that client and have to level up into CMMC ML2 yourself as an MSP? That could put you into 50 or 100K or more, right? Because you have to level up your product, your process, your policies, your tooling, how you conduct yourself. You have to have your own security plan in place. You always have to be iterating all the time. That's a proper security framework and process and posture, right? All of these things are critical components. So how that hard look in the mirror, is this right for me? Should I be continue to serve this client, or should I consider that I need to let them go because I really can't or shouldn't or can't afford it?
Yep.
If you're going to dive deeper into that space, or you have multiple clients in the DIB who need to become compliant, maybe a different conversation, because now you can, again, spread that cost across multiple clients over the term.
Yeah. How about talk about 7021? Why all of a sudden has, things gotten real? For years we've been hearing, CMMC, and it's the boy who cried wolf. No longer the case, Brian.
No longer the case. That ship has sailed, my friend. Here's the reality. Where we're at today is that we are expecting 7021 and what's called, again, the final rule, proposed rule, to be signed off on Title 32 CFR, to be signed off on in December. That's the current estimate, just to be very clear, right? But it's happening sooner than they expected, just to be clear. Like, there was a cyber AB town hall a couple of days ago, and it's happening sooner. So that means that all these contractors, let's first of all go back. Remember we talked about DFAR 7012, this compliance requirement in 2017? That was already a thing. CMMC, I'll just give you this quote from, it actually came from Jacob Horn. I want to give attribution. He says, CMMC isn't making you do the requirements, it's making sure you did them. Okay? And I want to make sure that you hear that. It's making sure you did them. CMMC is the enforcement of existing contract of regulation of DFAR 7012, and it's pushing that out. It's now saying you have to be certified under ML2, in most cases, an ML1, what's called self-attestation. Do not get caught with your pants down, either you or your client, because you could fall victim to a False Claims Act lawsuit by the DOJ, and you don't want to be on that end.
Well, speaking of bad things happening, literally the week after, I don't know if you've heard about the Georgia Tech whole
Sure thing.
debacle, but I think it's maybe not to spread FUD, Brian, but I guess just maybe a point that you're saying about getting caught with your pants down, about this is to check that you are really doing what you said we were going to be doing, And for years, you know, we always think, well, whether it's HIPAA or whatever it is are the teeth real? We have a real example where really amazing where the federal regulators jumped in here. Maybe just with the remaining time, again, this isn't to scare people, it's just to show that, again, check your customers. I think that's really the message here, but maybe, you know, just close us out, Brian, with what happened there and why, you know, the enforcement of this, the feds the DoD's finally taking so seriously.
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, we're heavily condensing here because it's such a thick product of, or book body of knowledge, right? That we're condensing. The reason that you should take this seriously is because if you're on the receiving end of a false claims act, let's say your customer is, you're going to get roped into that, right? Because chances are, if they're not compliant or they said they have been, that's a DOJ lawsuit. Could be what leads to what's called treble damages. So if they were awarded 10 million in contracts over the term when they're supposed to be compliant, and they were awarded that, and they're found guilty of committing fraud for the federal government, that could be a 33 times repayment, 30 million. That's going to rope you in. You'll be in that blast radius, right? You're going to be included in that, and you're not going to survive that, more than likely, right? Because that could bring charges, civil charges to you as an MSP. So you have to ask yourself, is there value in upping my game as an MSP? Because the opportunity, I'll be very clear, is massive. If you do this and say, I'm going to invest time, treasure, and talent and make this happen from MSP, I'm going to level up, become, one of very few who can serve the div at ML2 and charge appropriately and really grow your business. Because most MSPs, they're going to tap out. They're out. The vast majority of them. So you have to ask yourself those questions.
Brian, I think it's important before we lose everybody, the opportunity, because everybody asks, oh, there's not enough C3PAOs, and we won't get into what the assessors
That's
are.
a whole other problem.
Right. But the reality is, and again, quote Jacob, to your point, the massive opportunity for everybody here is there's not enough MSPs. That's the bigger issue. Can you maybe just, so people walk away feeling like maybe there's a good thing here?
Yeah, I'll put a finer point on it. If you're a larger MSP and you have the ability to invest at, say, 50 to 100K, maybe a little bit more. And again, I know it's a lot of money in a vacuum without context. That's a lot. I get it, right? But if you can make that investment and you have, again, DoD clients already, or you want to go after that market, and that's a very big if or when, then it may behoove you to do that, because you're going to have a massive opportunity, because the addressable market, right, is huge with a very small supply of MSPs that are certified to do the work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, Brian, awesome wealth of knowledge. I knew this was going to be beneficial for everyone.
Sure.
By the way, if people want to, you've got a lot more information to share. People want to understand more. Can they just reach out to you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'll put my email. If you want to reach out to me, you can feel free. My email is right in the chat. Okay. Pretty easy. Brian@exceedcyber.io.
Got it.
There you go.
Okay.
Happy to help. If anyone has questions, please reach out. We're big evangelists in the CMMC community. We're willing to help, willing to answer questions. It's a ton of information, and it's hard to take all of it in. I know that, and this was a feat to do this.
Right. Appreciate you rapid fire, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, you got it. Thanks, everybody. Great call today.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Take care, guys.